If something feels wrong and you stay anyway, that decision will follow you. Not everything dangerous looks dangerous. Sometimes it looks normal. A cabin with the lights off. A road that shouldn't be that empty. A neighbor who watches a little too long. You don't panic. You don't leave, because nothing has actually happened yet. That's the mistake. The 3 stories you're about to hear didn't start with screams. They started with hesitation. And by the time they understood what was wrong, they were already trapped inside it.
Story 1. The wrong exit at 2 a.m.
I didn't take the exit because I was lost. I took it because I was tired, and the sign promised something that felt like relief. Gas, food, restrooms. It was 2:07 a.m. on a highway that had been empty for so long it stopped feeling like a road and started feeling like a corridor. The kind of stretch where your headlights don't reveal the world, they just carve a narrow tunnel through it. I'd been driving home from a late shift in a different county, and my eyes had that dry, burning feeling that makes you blink harder than you should. The exit sign came up fast. White letters, clean reflectors, perfectly normal. I remember thinking it was a good time to stop because it felt safe to make a responsible decision. Get gas, wake up, keep moving. That's what tired people tell themselves when they don't want to admit they're pushing it. I took the ramp and the highway disappeared behind me like someone closed a door. At the bottom of the exit, the road narrowed into a 2-lane strip with no shoulder and no streetlights. My GPS recalculated and then did that thing where it pauses, like it's thinking. The screen went gray for a second. Then the route reappeared with a thin blue line that looked too confident for how empty everything felt. I drove a mile, then 2. No gas station, no diner, no lights. Just trees pressing in on both sides and a fog that seemed to sit low over the road, like breath. I turned the radio up a notch just to break the silence, but all I got was static. Not even a faint station, just white noise and the occasional pop, like someone tapping the speaker. That's when I noticed the first thing that didn't fit. A reflector post on the side of the road was turned backward. The orange face that should have been aimed at me was facing the trees, like someone had grabbed it and twisted it. I told myself it was nothing. A car clipped it. Weather. People mess with things. Then I saw another one. And another. 3 in a row, all turned the wrong direction. I slowed down without meaning to. My heart started doing that stupid thing where it beats harder, even though nothing has happened. I could feel my hands getting warm on the steering wheel. The GPS voice said, in that calm way it always does, continue for 1 mile. No mention of gas, no mention of services, just continue. Up ahead, the road bent right. The trees thickened, and my headlights caught something pale near the edge of the asphalt. For a second, I thought it was a deer, but it wasn't shaped like an animal. It was too vertical. A person, standing just off the road, not waving, not walking, just standing there, half in the ditch grass, half on the edge of the pavement, facing my car. I hit the brakes lightly, more instinct than decision. The car slowed. My headlights flooded the figure. It was a man in a light-colored hoodie. And what made my stomach drop wasn't that he was there. It was that he was looking straight at me, like he'd been waiting for my headlights to arrive. I didn't stop. Not fully. My foot hovered over the brake just long enough for the car to slow to maybe 20 miles an hour. The man didn't move. He didn't shield his eyes from the headlights. He didn't wave for help. He just stood there. The hoodie was pale gray, almost white under the beams. The hood was up, shadowing his face, but I could see enough to know he wasn't looking past me. He wasn't looking down the road. He was looking directly at me. I told myself the obvious thing. Broken down car, phone dead, needs help. That's what decent people think first. But there was no car, no hazard lights, no sound of an engine idling somewhere in the trees. Just him. As my car rolled closer, I noticed something else. He wasn't standing on the gravel shoulder like someone waiting safely off the road. He was standing exactly where a car would have to swerve to avoid him if he stepped forward. Perfect distance, perfect position. I tightened my grip on the wheel. The GPS said, continue for half a mile. Half a mile to what? Gas station or nothing? When I was about 50 feet away, the man finally moved. One step forward, not into the lane, just closer to it, enough to make it clear that if I passed him, it would be close. That was the moment my brain shifted from polite explanation to survival math. If I stopped, I'd have to unlock the door. If I slowed too much, he could grab the handle. If I tried to turn around, I'd have to stop completely on a narrow road with trees tight on both sides, and I still didn't know what was behind me. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't want to see headlights. I pressed the gas, not hard, just enough to commit. As I passed him, I forced myself not to turn my head, but in my peripheral vision, I saw him pivot, smoothly, keeping pace with my car for 2 steps, like he was measuring it. Then he stopped. I exhaled too early, because the road curved right almost immediately after, and the trees blocked him from view. And that's when my headlights caught something ahead. Red taillights, parked sideways across the road, an old pickup truck angled just enough to force any car to slow down. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like missing a step in the dark. The truck wasn't wrecked, it wasn't abandoned, it was positioned. Driver's door open, no one visible inside. I checked the mirror instinctively. The road behind me was empty, no sign of the hoodie, but I knew exactly what was happening. The man by the road wasn't the problem, he was the trigger, and the truck ahead, that was the real stop. My pulse started pounding in my ears. I had maybe 3 seconds to decide, slow down and figure it out, or do something reckless. The GPS calmly announced, "You have arrived." There was no gas station, no lights, no building, just the pickup, blocking the only way forward, and the narrow trees on either side. "You have arrived." The GPS repeated it like a joke. Arrived where? The pickup truck sat crooked across both lanes, engine off, headlights dead. The driver's door hung open just enough to make it look abandoned, but nothing about it felt abandoned. It felt arranged. I slowed instinctively, and that was my first mistake. Even easing off the gas made the space feel tighter. The trees on either side seemed closer now, like the road had narrowed without warning. I checked the mirror again, still empty, but I knew he was back there somewhere. You don't step into a lane at 2 a.m. on a dead road unless you know something else is in play. I had seconds to think. The pickup blocked the center, but not fully. There was a narrow gap on the right side where the shoulder dipped into dirt and shallow grass.
If I tried to squeeze past, I'd have to leave the pavement, risk getting stuck. If I stopped completely, I'd be exactly where they wanted me. That's when the driver's door of the pickup shifted. Not wide open, just enough to move, like someone inside adjusted their weight. I felt my chest tighten. There was someone in that truck, waiting, and I was rolling toward them at 15 miles an hour. I didn't think anymore. I floored it. The engine roared louder than it ever had. I jerked the wheel right, tires dropping off the asphalt into loose dirt. The right side dipped lower than I expected, and for a split second, I thought I'd buried the front tire, but momentum carried me forward. As I passed the pickup, I saw him. Not the hoodie, another man, sitting in the driver's seat, hands low on the steering wheel, watching me through the windshield. No surprise, no reaction, just watching, like I'd failed some quiet test. Then, something slammed against the rear of my car, a sharp metallic bang that jolted the whole frame. I didn't look. I didn't brake. I kept the gas down and forced the car back onto the road, tires clawing for traction. In the mirror, headlights exploded to life. The pickup, they'd been ready. The truck straightened out fast and accelerated behind me, high beams flooding my cabin. I couldn't see anything but white glare. My hands were shaking now, but I kept the wheel steady. The road curved again, tight and blind. I took it too fast and nearly clipped a tree, tires screaming against pavement. The truck stayed with me, close, too close. I grabbed my phone with one hand and hit 911 without looking. It rang once, twice. The truck behind me swerved slightly left, then right, testing me. The dispatcher answered. 911, what's your emergency? I said, there's a truck chasing me. They blocked the road. I'm off exit 73, I think. No lights, no buildings, just trees. The dispatcher asked for mile markers. There weren't any, just darkness. Then, ahead in the distance, I saw something that felt unreal. Faint green signs, highway markers, the ramp back up. The pickup accelerated. I pushed the car harder. If I could make it back onto the highway, there would be cameras, other cars, light. The ramp appeared fast. I didn't slow. I hit it at speed, tires gripping just enough to keep control. The pickup followed halfway up. Then, suddenly, it stopped. Not because it had to, because it chose to. It waited at the base of the ramp, watching me climb back toward the highway. And just before the trees swallowed it from view, I saw something in the high beams. Another person, standing beside the road where I'd first taken the exit. The hoodie. He'd never left.
I didn't stop driving. Not when I reached the highway. Not when the pickup disappeared from my mirror. Not even when the dispatcher told me to pull over somewhere safe so an officer could meet me. I drove 15 miles before I finally slowed down at a brightly lit truck stop. The kind with security cameras mounted every 10 feet and fluorescent lights that make everything feel exposed. My hands were still shaking when I stepped out of the car. The rear bumper had a dent in it, fresh. Metal pushed inward just slightly on the left side. They'd hit me, on purpose. I gave my statement to a state trooper who met me there. He listened carefully, took notes, and asked for descriptions. Hoodie, older pickup, no plate I could see. Exit 73. He frowned at that. There isn't an exit 73 in this stretch, he said. I felt something cold move through my stomach. Yes, there is, I said. Gas, food, restrooms. I saw the sign. He shook his head slowly. Closest services are 12 miles south of here. I pulled out my phone and opened my map history. There it was, a route detour, a small side road labeled County Route 19. No business markers, no service icons, just a narrow road cutting into forest. The trooper zoomed in. "People use that road to access logging trails," he said. "It's not an exit. There's no signage on the highway for it." But I'd seen the sign. Clear, reflective, official. Gas, food, restrooms. He must have seen the look on my face because he added, "You're not the first person to report something like this." That made everything worse. He explained that over the past year, a few drivers had called in about being forced off the highway late at night by temporary signs. Most disappeared by the time officers checked the area. Temporary signs. Set up, taken down. The reflectors turned backward. The truck angled across the road. The man positioned exactly where I'd have to slow down. It wasn't random. It was rehearsed. The trooper asked if I wanted to press charges if they caught someone. I said yes automatically, even though I knew the odds. The next morning, after a few hours of restless sleep at a motel, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I drove back. In daylight. I needed to see it. The highway looked ordinary in the sun. Traffic steady. No sense of danger. I passed mile marker 72. Then 74. There was no 73. No exit ramp. No sign. But between those two markers, I noticed something subtle. A darker strip of pavement in the median, like tires had crossed it repeatedly. I pulled over safely this time and walked along the shoulder. About 50 yards down, I found it. A patch of grass flattened slightly, and tucked just beyond the guardrail, a metal signpost base. Empty. Bolts exposed where something had been mounted. I stood there longer than I should have, listening. Even in daylight, the trees felt too still. They hadn't been improvising that night. They'd been working, setting up something that looked official enough to trust, waiting for someone tired enough to believe it. I don't drive late anymore unless I have to. And when I do, I don't take exits that promise relief without proof. Because here's the part that stays with me. The man in the hoodie never waved, never asked for help. He was just there to make sure I slowed down. And if I'd hesitated for even a few seconds longer, I don't think I would have made it back to the highway. Story 2. The Locked Room in Cabin 12. The cabin wasn't advertised as remote. It was described as private. There's a difference. Private sounds controlled. Remote sounds exposed. I rented Cabin 12 through a vacation app after a long stretch of overtime at work. 3 nights alone in the mountains, no neighbors within sight, no traffic noise, no deadlines, just trees and a wood-burning stove. That was the pitch. When I arrived just before sunset, everything looked exactly like the listing photos. Small A-frame structure, gravel driveway, tall pine trees wrapping around it like a wall. The nearest cabin was supposed to be half a mile away. It felt quiet, but not peaceful. More like the kind of quiet you notice because something else should be there and isn't. The key was in a lock. The cabin wasn't advertised as remote. It was described as private. There's a difference. Private sounds controlled. Remote sounds exposed. I rented Cabin 12 through a vacation app after a long stretch of overtime at work. 3 nights alone in the mountains, no neighbors within sight, no traffic noise, no deadlines, just trees and a wood-burning stove. That was the pitch. When I arrived just before sunset, everything looked exactly like the listing photos. Small A-frame structure, gravel driveway, tall pine trees wrapping around it like a wall. The nearest cabin was supposed to be half a mile away. It felt quiet, but not peaceful. More like the kind of quiet you notice because something else should be there and isn't. The key was in a lockbox. The code worked. The door opened easily. Inside smelled faintly like cedar and old smoke. Clean, organized, minimal. Nothing wrong. I set my bag down and walked through the place slowly, the way you do when you're somewhere new. Kitchen, bathroom, bedroom loft, back deck. Then I saw it. A second door. It wasn't shown in the photos. It was at the end of a short hallway near the bathroom. Plain wood, no handle, just a circular deadbolt lock where a knob should have been. That's unusual, I thought. Locked storage room, maybe. Owner's supplies. I knelt and tried the bolt out of curiosity. It didn't move. I stood up and brushed it off mentally. Every rental has a locked space. I made dinner, sat on the couch, watched the light fade through the windows. As darkness settled outside, the trees seemed to lean closer to the glass. The reflection of the cabin interior layered over the forest, making it hard to tell where inside ended and outside began. That's when I heard the first sound, a dull thump, not outside. Inside. It came from the direction of the hallway. I froze for a second, listening. Old cabins make noise, wood expands, pipes shift. I told myself that. Then it happened again, closer, a soft dragging sound against the floor, from behind the locked door. My brain rejected it immediately. No. It's an old structure, wind pressure, foundation settling. I stood up slowly and walked toward the hallway. The air felt cooler there. The locked door sat at the end, unchanged, still, solid. I leaned in and listened. Nothing. I was about to turn away when I noticed something small that shouldn't have been there. A thin line of light under the door. Not bright, not obvious, but enough to be visible against the dark hallway. I hadn't turned any lights on in that room, and there were no windows on that side of the cabin. I crouched lower, staring at the narrow glow. It flickered slightly, like a television or a phone screen shifting. I stepped back immediately. There are logical explanations for almost everything, but there's one rule I've learned over the years. If a locked room in a cabin shows light from underneath, it means one of two things. Either someone is inside or someone was there recently, and neither option felt like something I'd signed up for. I didn't open the door. Not because I wasn't curious, because curiosity and safety are not the same thing. I stood there in the hallway for maybe 30 seconds, staring at that thin line of light under the door. It wasn't steady.
It pulsed faintly, like something inside was changing brightness, like a screen. My phone was in my hand before I realized I'd picked it up. I opened the rental listing again and scrolled through the photos. Living room, kitchen, loft, deck view. No second door, no mention of storage, no owner's closet. I went back to the booking confirmation email and reread the description carefully. Entire cabin to yourself, that's what it said. Entire. The hallway creaked softly behind me, and I flinched. I hated that I flinched. I walked to the front door and checked the deadbolt. Locked. Windows sealed. Back deck sliding door, also locked. No sign of forced entry. The light under the door flickered again. This time, it dimmed completely for 2 seconds, then came back, like someone had moved in front of it. My throat felt dry. I forced myself to speak just to test the air. Hello? The word sounded small in the cabin. No answer. No movement. Just the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen and the faint crackle of wind outside brushing pine needles against the siding. I stepped closer to the door. The bolt was a heavy-duty deadbolt, the kind you'd install if you wanted to make sure something stayed secured or contained. I pressed my ear against the wood. At first, nothing. Then, a faint shifting sound. Not footsteps, not breathing, more like fabric brushing against something. Slow, careful. I pulled back immediately. There are a few moments in your life when your brain stops trying to comfort you and starts trying to protect you. This was one of them. If someone was in that room, they had been quiet until I arrived, which meant one of two things. They didn't know I'd rented the cabin, or they did. I grabbed my keys from the counter, just in case. My phone still had signal, 2 bars. I considered calling the property owner first, but I stopped myself. If this was some kind of maintenance oversight, fine. But if someone was actually inside that locked space, I didn't want to alert them that I knew. I walked back to the hallway one more time. The light under the door was gone now, completely dark. The silence felt heavier, like whatever had been happening inside had stopped because I had approached. And then, as I stood there, not moving, something knocked once from the other side. Not loud, not aggressive, just one controlled tap, directly at ear level, on the wood between us. And in that moment, I understood something clearly. Whoever was in that room knew exactly where I was standing.
The knock wasn't random. It wasn't the kind of sound old wood makes when it settles. It was deliberate, measured, placed exactly where my ear had been seconds earlier. I stepped back so fast, my shoulder hit the wall behind me. My pulse was loud enough to drown out the refrigerator hum. I stared at the door like it might breathe. Nothing happened. No second knock, no voice, just silence. But it wasn't neutral silence, it was waiting silence. I forced myself to move. Standing still in that hallway felt like participating in something I didn't understand. I walked quickly into the living room and grabbed the heavy iron poker from beside the fireplace. It felt stupid, but it felt better than empty hands. I checked my phone. Signal still there. I opened the rental app and found the owner's contact number. My thumb hovered over it, but I didn't press call. Instead, I walked back toward the hallway again, slowly. The door was still closed, the bolt unmoved.
I didn't press my ear to it this time. I stood 2 feet away. "Who's in there?" I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. No answer. But then, the faintest sound. A shuffle, followed by what I can only describe as weight shifting on the floor. And then, 3 slow knocks. Not frantic, not hard, evenly spaced. The same rhythm someone would use if they were trying to communicate. Tap, tap, tap. My grip tightened on the poker. That rhythm did something to me. It wasn't random noise, it was pattern, which meant intention. I backed up toward the living room again, and that's when I noticed something new. The front door. The deadbolt was still locked, but the handle was turned slightly downward. Not fully, just enough to suggest pressure had been applied from the outside. I stared at it. The metal trembled faintly. Someone was touching it. At the same time, someone was behind the locked door. That's when the full picture hit me. This wasn't about one person in a storage room. This was coordination. One inside, one outside. My heart dropped into my stomach. The handle on the front door stopped moving. Silence again. Then the hallway floor creaked. Not from behind the locked door, from inside the hallway, between me and the living room. I turned slowly. The hallway was empty. The locked door was still closed, but the creak had come from the floorboards outside it, which meant whatever had knocked from inside that room wasn't inside anymore. The bolt on the locked door was still engaged, still turned fully. I stared at it, then at the empty hallway, then back at the bolt. It hadn't moved, and yet something had stepped onto the hallway floor. I heard breathing then. Not mine, not outside. Close, behind me, right at the edge of the living room darkness.
The breathing wasn't loud. It wasn't theatrical. It was close. Close enough that I could feel it against the back of my neck before I processed what I was hearing. I didn't turn around immediately. There's something about your brain that tries to protect you from confirming the worst possibility. If you don't look, maybe it's not real. The breathing stopped. I turned anyway. The living room was empty. The couch, the kitchen counter, the front door, all exactly where they should be. No one standing there, no shadow shifting across the walls. But the air felt disturbed, like someone had just moved through it. I backed toward the hallway again, keeping my eyes on the living room. The locked door was still closed, the bolt untouched. I stepped closer, slowly, and I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I reached out and tried the bolt. It turned, smoothly, easily, unlocked. My hand froze. I hadn't heard it move, hadn't seen anyone touch it, but the bolt was no longer secured. The door opened inward with almost no resistance. The room beyond was small. No windows, no light on, just empty floor and unfinished wooden walls. No furniture, no bedding, no evidence anyone had been living inside it. But in the center of the floor, a folding chair, facing the door, positioned exactly where someone would sit to look at the hallway, to look at me. I didn't step inside. I couldn't. I scanned the walls quickly. No closet, no hidden passage, no second exit, just solid boards and exposed beams. The air smelled faintly stale,
like a space that had been closed for a long time, except the folding chair's legs had fresh scrape marks beneath them, parallel lines in the wood, recent. Something had moved it. I backed away from the doorway slowly. The front door handle turned again, this time harder. The deadbolt held. A single knock came from outside, then another, then 3 in a row, the same rhythm as before. Inside the hallway, the folding chair shifted, not sliding across the room, just adjusting slightly, as if someone had just stood up from it. I didn't stay. I grabbed my keys, threw the front door open between knocks, and ran. I didn't look left or right. I didn't check if someone was there. I sprinted to my car and locked the doors before I even sat down properly. The porch light flickered once, then went out. The cabin stood in complete darkness as I reversed down the gravel drive. No figures chased me. No one appeared in the headlights. It looked empty again, completely normal. The next morning, I called the rental company. They apologized for any confusion, said cabin 12 had been vacant for weeks. No maintenance scheduled, no other bookings. And when I asked about the locked room, there was a long pause. Then the representative said something that still doesn't sit right with me. Cabin 12 doesn't have a second interior door. I didn't argue. I didn't go back. But sometimes when I think about that folding chair, I don't think it was placed there to keep something inside. I think it was placed there so someone could sit quietly and wait for whoever rented the cabin next.
Story 3. The light across the street.
It started with a light that stayed on too long. That's it. Nothing dramatic, no screams, no shadows in windows. Just a porch light across the street that never turned off. I moved into the house in late October. Small suburban neighborhood outside Indianapolis. Quiet street, mostly families. 2-story homes with trimmed lawns and identical mailboxes. The house directly across from mine was empty when I moved in. For the first 3 weeks, no cars in the driveway, no trash cans at the curb, no signs of life. Then one night, around 3:12 a.m., I woke up. I don't know why. No loud noise, no phone notification, just that instinctive wake-up where your eyes open and you're suddenly alert. I rolled over and checked the time. 3:12. The red digits on my alarm clock were sharp against the dark. And that's when I noticed the glow in my room. Soft, faint, coming through the blinds. I sat up. Across the street, the porch light on the previously empty house was on. Not motion sensor bright, not flickering, just steady, warm yellow. I stared at it for maybe 30 seconds before lying back down. Someone finally moved in, I told myself. Normal. People exist. Lights turn on. I went back to sleep. The next night, I woke up again. 3:12. Same glow through the blinds, same porch light on. That's when I started paying attention. The following morning, I checked through my front window before leaving for work. Driveway empty. No car, no packages, no trash cans out. No footprints in the thin frost on the lawn. But the porch light was off again, like it had never been on. I watched for signs over the next few days. No moving truck, no furniture delivered, no neighbors mentioning anything. Just the house, still,
closed, unoccupied, until 3:12 a.m. On the fourth night, I didn't wait to wake up naturally. I set an alarm for 3:10. When it buzzed softly, I turned it off and sat up immediately. Dark, no glow yet. I watched the blinds. At exactly 3:12, the light clicked on. Not gradually, not dimming up, instant, as if someone flipped a switch with intention. My chest tightened, because this time I was awake when it happened, which meant I knew something I couldn't explain. The house had no visible activity during the day, but at 3:12 a.m., without fail, the porch light turned on and stayed on for exactly 6 minutes, then went dark again, like a signal.
The fifth night, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I opened the front door. At 3:11 a.m., I stood just inside the threshold, lights off behind me, watching the empty house across the street. The neighborhood was completely silent. No cars passing, no dogs barking, no distant sirens. It felt paused. At exactly 3:12, the porch light snapped on, not dimming, not flickering, just instant. I felt that tightness in my chest again, but this time I didn't stay inside. I stepped onto my porch. Cold air hit my face, sharper than I expected. My breath fogged in front of me. The house across the street looked the same as it had for weeks. Curtains drawn, windows dark, no movement. I crossed halfway down my driveway. Still nothing. The porch light was steady, almost inviting, like it wanted to be noticed. I stopped near the curb. Then I saw something new. The front door of the house wasn't fully closed. It was slightly ajar, not wide enough to see inside clearly, but open enough to know it wasn't sealed. My pulse started to climb. No one had moved in. No cars, no packages, no activity. So why was the door open at 3:12 a.m.? I told myself it could have been left that way earlier. Wind, poor latch. But the angle didn't look accidental. It looked intentional. And then I noticed something else. A shadow in the doorway. Not stepping out, not moving, just occupying the dark behind the door. I couldn't see details, no face, no clothing, just density, a human shape where darkness should have been empty. My body reacted before my brain did. I stepped backward, slowly. The shadow didn't move. The porch light hummed faintly overhead. 6 minutes. That's how long it stayed on every night. I checked my phone. 3:17. 1 minute left. I couldn't look away. The shadow remained perfectly still. Then, without warning, the light shut off. Complete darkness swallowed the house. I blinked hard, trying to adjust. The doorway was gone. The shadow was gone. The house looked empty again. I stood there longer than I should have, trying to convince myself I imagined it. The next morning, I walked across the street in daylight. I knocked. No answer. I checked the mailbox. Empty. No name. The front door was fully closed, and when I looked at the porch light fixture up close, the bulb was unscrewed halfway, loose enough that it shouldn't have worked at all. I tightened it slightly with my fingers. It wobbled, like someone had intentionally left it that way. That night, at 3:12, the porch light came on again. After the seventh night, I stopped pretending it was coincidence. You can ignore something once, twice, maybe even 3 times, but when something happens at the exact same minute every night, your brain stops labeling it random.
it becomes pattern, and patterns mean intention. On the 8th night, I didn't stand on my porch. I stayed inside, lights off, watching through a narrow gap in the blinds. 3:11, nothing. 3:12, the porch light clicked on. The front door eased open again. This time, it opened wider, enough for me to clearly see inside the hallway. Dark interior, no lamps, no television glow, just black. But someone was there, standing in the doorway, not outside, not fully inside, balanced in the frame. And this time I could see more detail. Tall, broad shoulders, no movement, no head tilt, just facing directly toward my house, toward my window, toward me, even though my lights were off, even though the blinds were nearly closed. I felt exposed in a way that didn't make sense, like being watched through something thinner than glass. I stepped away from the window immediately, heart pounding hard enough to feel in my throat. This was the point where normal people call the police, so I did. I explained everything carefully. Light turning on every night at the same time, door opening, someone standing in it. The dispatcher asked if I saw a weapon. No. Did they step onto your property? No. Were there signs of forced entry? No. The officer who came by an hour later walked across the street with a flashlight, knocked on the door, no answer, checked windows, looked around the perimeter. He came back shaking his head. "Doesn't look like anyone's living there," he said. "Utilities appear shut off." That phrase stuck with me. Utilities shut off. I didn't sleep much after that. The next morning, I drove to the county property records office. I wanted to know who owned the house. The clerk pulled it up quickly. The house had been in foreclosure for almost a year. No listed occupant, no recent lease, no active electricity account. I drove home in silence. That night, I didn't set an alarm. I didn't wait by the window. I sat in the dark on my couch with the lights off and the blinds fully open. 3:12. The porch light snapped on. The front door opened wider than before, and this time, the figure stepped forward, onto the porch, into full view. It wasn't detailed enough to identify, but it was clearly human, clearly facing me. And then, it lifted its hand, not waving, not signaling, just slowly raising it to chest level and pointing directly at my house. When it pointed at my house, I didn't move. I couldn't. There's a specific kind of fear that doesn't feel loud. It doesn't make you scream or run. It locks you in place. The figure stood under the porch light, arm raised, finger extended in my direction. Not aggressively, not shaking, just steady, like it had finally decided something. My lights were off. The room behind me was dark. There was no reason it should have been able to see me clearly. But it was facing my living room window with absolute precision. I felt exposed in a way that didn't make sense. The porch light stayed on. 3:13, 3:14, longer than usual. The door behind the figure remained open, revealing only darkness inside. No furniture outlines, no hallway shape, just black. At 3:15, the figure lowered its hand, turned, and walked back into the house. The porch light didn't shut off immediately. It stayed on for another full minute, like a countdown. Then it went dark. The door closed. I didn't sleep. I didn't even move from the couch until sunrise. When morning came, I crossed the street again. Broad daylight, birds out, completely normal suburban noise. The house looked abandoned. I walked up the driveway, knocked on the door. No answer. I tried the knob. Locked. I stepped back and looked at the porch light fixture. The bulb was still half unscrewed, just like before. I twisted it tighter.
Nothing happened. It didn't flicker, didn't spark, didn't respond. I walked around the side of the house. Every window was dusty, no footprints in the soil near the foundation, no trash cans, no sign of life. When I returned to my porch, I looked up at my own house, at my own windows, and that's when I saw it. A small piece of paper taped to the inside of my living room window, facing outward. I hadn't put it there. I stepped closer. It was positioned at eye level from across the street, 3 numbers written in black marker, 3:12. Nothing else, no name, no message, just the time. I ran inside immediately. My door was still locked, windows sealed, no signs of forced entry. But the paper was real, taped from the inside, facing out. That night, I didn't wait for 3:12. I packed a bag before midnight and left. I stayed with a friend across town for the next few days. When we returned with him during the day, the house across the street had a "for sale" sign posted on the lawn, brand new. No record of a listing before that week, no utilities active, no tenant history, and no one in the neighborhood could remember the porch light ever turning on. I sold my house 3 months later. I never saw the figure again, but sometimes I still wake up at 3:12, and for a split second, I expect to see that glow through the blinds and something standing across the street, waiting for me to look back. None of these stories required anything supernatural. No monsters, no impossible events. Just small details. An exit that shouldn't have been there. A room that shouldn't have had light behind it. A porch light that turned on at the exact same minute every night. That's all it takes. Something slightly misplaced. Something slightly off. Something that doesn't demand panic, only attention. And most people don't react to things that only require attention. They wait. They rationalize. They tell themselves it's nothing. Because overreacting feels worse than being wrong. Until being wrong isn't the worst outcome anymore. The highway was prepared. The cabin wasn't empty. The house across the street wasn't inactive. In every case, someone else was already ahead of them, already watching, already positioned, already patient. That's the part that lingers, not what happened, but how quietly it began. If you're listening to this at night, take a second. Look around the room you're in. Notice what feels normal. Then ask yourself, if something had changed slightly, would you recognize it? Or would you convince yourself it was nothing? Some situations don't announce themselves. They just wait for you to ignore the first detail. And once you do, they don't need to rush.